Greetings, humans. Welcome to the fourth episode of the Anti-Professional Podcast. I'm so happy you're here. Today, I'm speaking with Brooke Monaghan about forging your own path through entrepreneurship and breaking the rules, because some of the rules suck and need to be broken. Just a reminder, this podcast is sponsored by Identity Pending, which is the digital marketing agency that I own. We will help you solve any creative and technical problem as it relates to getting people to know about your business. So if you have a bold business or you want to get the word out about what you're doing, please reach out. I would love to work with more technical SaaS founders, more climate justice companies. So whoever you are, if you're an artist, if you're a tech person, if you're solving problems out there, I want to help you help more people by getting the word out. So thanks so much for listening. Let's get into the episode. Welcome to the fourth episode of the Anti-Professional Podcast. I am here with Brooke Monaghan, and as is tradition, I will be introducing Brooke with a poem, which goes like this. Brooke, it took only a minute for us to realize that we're both in it. The fight for the right to break the rules, to shatter the norms and master the tools of the ones who built the walls and made us pay for entry. Together, we'll make resources available for every person who has a dream or a scheme or possibly just a loose theme that they want to bring into being. And we won't tell them that they're wrong if they don't want to go along with manipulative sales and marketing tactics. It's okay to work with empathic somatics. It's okay to follow whatever your path is because your path to success is yours. I hope this episode gives anyone listening the emphatic permission to do something different. With all of that spoken, the floor is now open. Welcome, Brooke, to the podcast. And here I am hoping that this conversation wakes somebody up. So welcome, Brooke.
Thank you so much for that. My cheeks hurt now. That was so sweet. Thank you. Thanks for the warm intro. This is a very unique introduction for I've done many podcast interviews, and hats off to you.
Thank you. I think I'm noticing every time I do it, I'm almost like conjuring something, like trying to do a little bit of a spell before. So we'll see what that does.
I love it.
But now I'll give you the opportunity to introduce yourself. Would you mind telling us who you are and what you stand for?
Sure. So my name is Brooke Monaghan. I use she and her pronouns, and I am. There's so many words to describe what I do. I'm kind of leaning into the title of like trusted advisor, but I call myself a business coach a lot because people recognize the term business coach. That's why I use that term. Because I don't have enough characters to describe everything that I do. And really my work is focused on helping entrepreneurs and also leaders from values-driven organizations really like align their businesses with what they really believe in and find a more sustainable approach to show up to business. And coming from a 4-year degree in entrepreneurial management, I am on this mission to set the record straight that it is not true that there are some people who are just cut out for business and other people who are not cut out for business. Because the beautiful thing about being in business for yourself is you get to do it however you want. And your people are going to find you. And, you know, I think that one of the biggest reasons that, or the reason that I believe in that so much is because we can look around at any moment and see that there are all kinds of people whose needs are not being met. And they're not being met because there are certain types of people ending up in positions where they are creating what is available for us. And so we do get to do things differently because there's always going to be people out there who want someone who does things differently. Right. So, yeah, I stand for a lot, but I definitely stand for making this path to self-employment as accessible as I can for anyone who knows that it's right for them and for some reason feels like they don't have what it takes.
Yeah, I think that's a really important thing to be bringing into the world right now because, you know, the whole reason we're having this podcast is because in some ways it feels like there's almost a prescription for how to be an entrepreneur. And I think it's such a limiting definition that doesn't create space for so many creative and interesting people who have so much to offer. And I'm glad that we're out there, you know, trying to basically break down the walls and open it up for anybody who has that dream. And so I was reading through your the answers that you sent to me about professionalism, and you let's see, I have it here that you said, yeah, brilliant people self-select out because of the concept of professionalism. So I like to ask, what has been your experience of professionalism? Like, either did you attempt to be very professional early in your career and then find it didn't work for you? Was it always a no? Like, how have you sort of danced with professionalism as a concept?
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, I early in my career I went through some really weird jobs that were not professional at all. I started off in, like restaurants, which are like, professional on one side of the door and then like the most unprofessional environment you've ever seen on the other side. I then ended up working in some very bizarre situation where I was taking care of like 150 rabbits at one point. Like when I was in college, my job was I was working at, I guess you could call it like a rabbit sanctuary, but really it was just someone's private residence who had a like ton of rabbits. This could be a whole episode, but without getting into it, not exactly a professional setting. And then that person who owned that residence what happened to work for a huge jewelry company, and they started opening stores, and I started opening stores for them, and that was how I ended up kind of getting into retail. And so there's an interesting thing in retail because around certain types of people in the organization, you might try to present as professional. But really, most people who have been in retail for a long time, it's like every individual store has its own kind of concept of what it means to be professional. And oftentimes it just depends on the person that's running that store. So anyways, I did all of that I was doing that for a very long time, and then ended up in the nonprofit world, where I think that one of the reasons why I gravitated to the place that I did was because it was a drug user health organization, and it was there to help people. It was a harm reduction based organization. So it was really breaking the rules. Like, they were all about giving people safe access and helping people do things in a way that was safe for them, that our society would like to say you just shouldn't do. So I guess all of this to say, I had lots of practice being in places where I could see that the professional element of things wasn't what was important to make things work well and have an impact. And I think that when I ended up at a point in my career, like probably once I ended up in the nonprofit world, and I was around people who I could see were trying to appear as professional, by that point, I was so good at seeing through it that I feel like I was just kind of internally calling bullshit on people all the time, and has already decided that that's just not what I was going to try to do. But with that being said, I mean, I would say that when I was in business school, there's definitely this image of who is going to make it in business that is very much, it's talked about all the time. And I think that for me, I just never thought that I was ever going to fit that. And so I never even really tried because I knew that it just wasn't going to work for me. So yeah, I guess that's kind of my experience with all of that and why I ended up where I'm at now. And this view.
Is that what led to you sort of starting your own business? Like, for myself, I think I have a hard time fitting into people's expectations in corporate environments, so I have a little bit more versatility in my own space.
I think the thing for me, to be honest with you, if we're getting really, like, if we're just going straight to the core of what's going on here, I think that for me, a lot of it was my own traumatic past. First of all, I come from a fishing family. Like, my dad was a lobsterman, and most of the people in my family all ran boats and were completely unprofessional. And also no one told them what to do. They were in total control and it was grueling labor. But I think that seeing that model of things that was one element of it. But I think the other part is like being in a family where there's lots of drug and alcohol use, witnessing abuse, witnessing a lot of the things that I did. I have an issue being told what to do.
Same, honestly.
I need to be in control of my environment to feel safe. And from very early on, from the time that I was 14, I knew that I wanted to work for myself, and I knew that I wanted to be in control of my days. I wanted to be in control of the work that I did. And also, I have one of the things that I've really had to work on is with my money mindset is this idea that whoever is paying you kind of is in control of you. And that is something that has always been present for me. And so I always felt like I needed to be in full control of that for myself, to not feel like other people could control me and control my life and tell me what to do. And as I, do my own trauma recovery work, I notice more and more of that was a lot of the motivation. I think that if I wanted to, I absolutely could fit in as a professional. I think that I have the privilege of, if I wanted to fit in those environments, I definitely could. But for me, it feels like I would die if I did that on a nervous system level for lots of reasons, So I think that's most of it.
Yeah, I definitely resonate with that. I feel like after a while, I start to feel so pent up with like things that I could do that they won't let me do. Like something that I've talked about a few times is like I will often get hired in technical roles, but I do have 10 years of marketing experience because I've never done marketing for a company. People do not want to listen to me in a corporate environment about everything I know about marketing. They just want me to do the technical side. And I find that limitation of only wanting one of my skill sets is extremely frustrating for me.
Yeah.
Because I always see the connections across multiple fields. And I think that's an entrepreneurial thing also.
Yeah, it's an entrepreneurial thing. And for me too, like I'm dyslexic and I've learned more about my brain and the way that my brain works recently, and why so many entrepreneurs are dyslexic is because and it's not just dyslexia. It's like, those of us who are like, neurodiversity means that some of us actually are constantly making connections between different things that we learned. And when we are expected to just do one job and do it the way that we were told to do it, it is incredibly frustrating because we can already see the way that it's going to connect to all of the other things.
And ways that it could be done better.
Ways it could be done better, right? And for me, I'm not good at putting language to that. I can sense a thing in my mind and I know how a thing works, but I can't put language to it. It's like I paint, I do oil paintings, and this happened to me just the other day where it's like I knew for whatever reason I was editing something out of this painting that I was working off of an image, and I knew based on what I edited out that the shadow on the wall should be placed slightly differently. And when I was explaining to the person who owns the studio why I edited it the way that I did, I could not explain it. But it was crystal clear to me the way that the light would go through that window and how it would work. So all of this to say, yeah, I'm the same way that you are, where I'm constantly drawing connections between different things. And one of the things and some people who I know who are very into human design always love to tell me that this also has to do with the fact that I'm a manifesting generator. It's not I don't know that much about it, but I'm the kind of person who, when I see a thing and I understand how it works, I need to move on it. And if I can't, I get very frustrated. And I absolutely, and this is one of the things that made me such a good manager, honestly, I cannot bear going through the motions of something when I know that it's not actually going to have the result that it should have. I need to understand why. I need to understand how things work, and I need to do things in a way that is intentional and is actually going to have the impact. And when I'm held back from that, I am I feel like I'm it's so frustrating.
Yeah, it's like being shook up in a soda can or something. It's like, and then it's going to come out somewhere, like it always does.
Yeah.
So you mentioned something earlier, unprofessional, which I think is very different from anti-professional. And that's something I'm trying to work on the definition here, because unprofessional would be like, oh, I don't meet my deadlines, or like I show up for work, in a state that makes it hard for me to do my job well. So the thing I'm really trying to like define with this work is anti-professional does not mean that you're bad at your job.
Totally.
It means that you're really good at your job on your own terms.
Yeah.
And yeah, curious if you have any thoughts on that.
I do. I mean, I think that it's a similar thing for me. I talk about like breaking the rules of business a lot, and some people could hear that and think that I'm saying like just break all of the rules and just like who cares about ethical or unethical? And that's actually the exact opposite of what I'm saying. And I think that you and I both. I think that the common denominator here is integrity. It's you understanding what is you having strong values. You being conscientious, you caring about doing a good job, and similar to what we were just talking about, understanding what is important to that and what is just extraneous to try to keep up appearances and perpetuate some made up thing that is, let's be honest, benefiting a very specific group of people. Right?
Very, very specific group of people.
Yeah.
Who invented the rules.
Exactly. Right. And so I think that, for me, it's integrity is the piece there. If it's against your integrity to appear professional and to follow the guidelines of whatever professional is in whatever industry you're in, then I say, don't fit yourself into that box, like break that rule, be anti-professional in that sense. If it's aligned with your values, then sure. Right. And so I think things like, meeting deadlines, and even that isn't nuanced, right? Like meeting deadlines, but also not operating on a false sense of urgency just because of the fact that we've been told that like this is every single thing is like some urgent like fire drill, and instead being able to have conversations and say, hey, for me to do a really good job for you, actually this is what we're looking at for timeline, let's get aligned. Right. So it's about coming back to the why. And I think it's about coming back to what's really important to you and what's really important to the thing that you said that you were going to do. What's really important for you to be able to make good on the promises that you made. Usually being quote unquote professional is not actually that important to doing a good job.
And you bring up an interesting point when we like start working with someone where, I might have to say like, hey, because of XYZ, I need to only communicate with you during, these hours, or I need to communicate in this way. And I think that a lot of us, especially those of us who have accommodation needs, are really trained to not ask. Oh, yeah. And for me, early in my career, I was afraid to communicate my needs as a service provider. And now I think I'm a lot better at it, or I'll even like not work with clients if I know that they're gonna be bad for my mental health, to be honest. And so I'm curious if you've had a journey with that at all, of like articulating what you need, either in a corporate context or in just working for yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I think that probably. When you start working for yourself, it's like you so quickly realize that what you once thought was a completely unreasonable ask is like so important, right? Like if you just go from the corporate world into self-employment and you continue with putting those same standards on yourself, you will so quickly end up in a completely unsustainable place. My first client when I started working for myself was actually my previous employer. So I was leaving that job. I was about to move across the country. They were like super bummed that I was leaving. And I was like, well, hey, I'm thinking about starting a consulting business. Why don't you hire me back as a consultant? And that ended up being my first client. And I had to ask for a lot more money per hour. I had to ask for things like a retainer where part of what you're paying me for is me just being available, right? Like that doesn't make sense to people in that job who haven't worked with consultants before, because to them, it's like, well, what am I even paying you for? But on our end, right? It's like, I can't just make myself available to a bunch of different people and then actually be expected to just deliver. What if everyone comes through at one time, right? So I think that it was, probably the whole first year of my business was me slowly and incrementally asking for more and more and setting firmer boundaries. And being able to tolerate the pushback that I got from potential clients, because I was experiencing firsthand what it meant when I didn't hold those boundaries. It's the same thing as when I work with one-on-one clients, with my private coaching clients. There are certain things that I want to be able to do for my private coaching clients. I don't want to have to time your sessions and be like, well, we're right in the middle of something, but it's been 60 minutes, so bye, right? Like they're paying me enough that I would like to be able to hold a little bit more space around that. I would like to be able to, if you vox me with something, let's get on a call and handle it. Because part of my promise to you as one of my private coaching clients is that I am going to be able to help you handle that stuff as it comes up. My pricing reflects that. I'm not the kind of coach who is like, okay, 50 minutes, bye. If I was, I might price differently. That's something that I now need to be able to articulate to people. And the only way that I was able to kind of get clear on what it was that I needed to ask for and got to ask for was to do it without boundaries so many times and witness how completely unsustainable and unreasonable the situations I was getting myself into were. That's how we build that discernment. So
yeah, that's how you get to like burnout and almost like energetic injury, which, I'm in my first year of like starting up again. And there's definitely been times where I'm like, wow, I'm limping now because I did a really bad job of setting expectations.
Oh yeah. If you go back to the beginning of my podcast, you'll see a 5-month gap where I just kind of disappeared. And I didn't disappear just from the podcast feed. I disappeared from every online. I stopped sending newsletters. I stopped posting on social media. I stopped even trying to get clients online because I completely burnt myself out. And the reason that I burnt myself out was because I was trying to just like follow the advice on how you run an online business, do it the right way. And it was absolutely unsustainable and also just like ineffective. Like it did not work,
Right. And especially if everyone is taking the same advice from the same mainstream sources, then all of the customers are getting flooded with the LinkedIn cold DMs, with the, all of these things that we see overdone to the point where they become white noise that we tune out.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's also the beauty of being anti-professional or even just like creative about your strategy. Is like you're breaking through the noise because it is a clamor of people doing the same thing everywhere around you. Yeah. And I think in this day and age, that's just not a smart strategy. Agreed. Unless you really can play the numbers game like crazy.
Yeah. And you have to have some amount of resources, or you have to be resourced in some way that most of us are not, I think, for that to actually work. Either you have to have actually a bunch of experience under your belt that most people are not talking about, right? Like I went from like in 1 year, I grew my business to 6 figures. Well, what does in 1 year mean? Because what were you doing before that 1 year? Were you working in that exact same industry and you brought all of those clients with you? Or I grew my business to this level in 1 year. Well, how much money did you invest to be able to do that? How many people are you paying, right? Versus someone who, like in my case, right? I did everything myself in the beginning, but even first of all, I have a partner and I don't have children. So the amount of time that I have available is like so much more than, because my husband and I kind of planned things where it was like, I'm going to work retail while you're getting your PhD. When you're done with your PhD, I'm going to switch to self-employment. That's when I'll take the risk. You can't make those kinds of plans and just free up that kind of time without that. And also, like, I didn't have to worry about childcare. So, so it's worth noting the differences and what it takes for that kind of advice to actually be feasible. In most cases, like there are things that you can do that can control that if you have the resources. And also there's an element of luck involved. 100%. Especially if it comes down to going viral on some platform, like, yeah,
you can't bank on that for sure.
No.
And so I noticed in your application that you mentioned that like weird niche businesses are actually like more successful. And I would love to hear from you, like, what are some weird niche businesses you've worked with and that you've seen like do really well that are just like so bizarre?
Yeah. So, well, the thing is, like, it's not so much that I think that if you look at all of the super successful businesses, you're going to find that they're in some weird niche. But what it is that I work with a lot of people who come to me and they're like, okay, this is what I do and this is the industry that I'm in. And they're saying some very general thing about like, you know, I'm a blank. And they're trying to appear, again, professional. These are my certifications. These are my qualifications. This is how much experience I have. And for me, I'm like, what are the other things, though, that you're not letting people see? How do you approach this differently, right? And one of the things that is like really challenging about that is that oftentimes those things are things that we consider to be a disadvantage. So if you don't have a lot of experience in a field, you probably have a totally different view of how to approach that thing. You're not having to unlearn all of that standard advice. So you can come into it and be like, we're actually going to do things totally differently, right? And have that critical thinking piece turned up a little bit more because you're not having to break out of, oh, but this is the right way to do things, right? And so when people lean into that, I think that it helps quite a bit. But whenever people say to me, you know, well, I couldn't just do that. Like, for example, I had a client at one point who was a tarot reader and wrote the readings as poems and then sent them in the mail. Hand wrote them and then sent them in the mail. And I loved it. And when she was like, but I just don't know if this can work. I would always send her links to like these weird businesses that I would found. And one of the ones that I found was like a cheese sculpture. Like, yeah, this
I could see that working.
Makes very elaborate cheese sculptures. And here's the thing. Do I think that that has mass market appeal? No. Do I think that she's like making millions of dollars? I don't know. Maybe. Probably not. But it all comes down to like what actually matters to you in your version of success. Because as far as I'm concerned, if I was just in this to make a lot of money, I would just climb the corporate ladder because that's a lot easier than having to grow a business. It's so much more predictable and it's so much easier. So when I say more successful, a big part of that is like actually fits your version of what you wanted when you started working for yourself. Right? So yeah, I don't even know if I just answered your question, but
I think mentioning cheese sculptures is good. You know, I was looking for examples of like, because, you know, people do have that story of like, oh, well, I can't do that. Or I've had that story of like, well, people like me don't get to be business coaches. And then I was like, wait a minute, that thought is exactly why I have to do it.
Exactly. Because guess what? People do not like business consultants. Do you want to like have to call up some like, no offense if they're listening, I doubt that they are. Do you want to call up some old dude in a suit who's like all of his experience has come from like corporate America and like ask him for help and he walks in with his briefcase and then tells you like all of the things that you have to? No, I don't. And lots of other people don't want to either. We want advice from people and support from people who, first of all, we trust that they actually understand us and also who have actually experienced some shit. Like when we see people online who are like, I did this, so you can do it too. It's like, I don't want to if you have millions of email subscribers, love you so much. Congratulations. I don't want your course on how to get email subscribers because you are dealing with a totally different situation than I'm dealing with.
Yeah, and you probably pumped like maybe $100,000 into ads to get those newsletter subscribers, which great. I'm super glad that you had access to that capital, but many of us do not.
Right. Or many, many, many years. And guess what? The strategies have changed. The internet is not operating the way that it was when you first started. So like, I want somebody who is showing me instead, like one of the most successful workshops that I did was a workshop that I had done on writing effective newsletters. And I showed, and it was specifically for people who had small email lists. And I just like screenshotted, like I have 100 email subscribers. That was at the time that I offered it. And that was why people enrolled. They were like, you're not going to give me advice, like standard boilerplate advice on how to write effective emails to your list of 10,000 people. You're operating a business and you're getting most of your clients from your email list and you only have 100 subscribers. I only have 100 subscribers. Okay, now we can talk, right? So all of that to say, yeah, it's like the thing that you're telling yourself is like the reason why you can't do a thing. You have the option, and I'm not saying that it's going to be easy, and I'm also not saying that everyone's situation is the same because different people have different considerations, but it is an option to actually lean into that more and allow people to see that so that they can then see, oh, you're actually different from everybody else who is doing this.
Yeah, and like you say, what you might first perceive as a disadvantage can actually be the thing that attracts people to you. And that's what I've really leaned into. Like, I've found so many folks who are also on the autism spectrum who want to show up in their content differently. And nobody is solving that problem for them. They're just saying, put your face on there and like do all these things that make you uncomfortable. And it's like, they're not going to do that. They need someone who's going to listen to them, who's going to ask them questions rather than telling them things and come up with a solution together. And I feel like there's too many people who are just like, this is the one way to do it. And I think what I love about what I do is like, wow, I've never thought about how to solve that. But based on my experience of solving these other related problems, let's start with a hypothesis and see what happens.
Right.
Like my entire business is hypothesis based because we're always on the edge. And I love that about it. Because that's what keeps me interested every day. Is like, ooh, what do we learn if we try this?
Yeah. It's also how you get good at what you do instead of just building a marketing machine. Because that's one of the other things is like, and now maybe we're getting off track, but it's like, you know, there's marketing and then there's your work. And that gets very confused in the online business space where people who are very good at marketing and getting clients appear as the expert because they're getting clients when maybe they're just good at marketing. And what happens when you get into that container with them? Can they actually do what they say they can do? Maybe they're really great at writing a sales page that pumps you up and motivates you to buy. What happens when you get in the room? Are they actually able to provide you with the support? And if you are so like hell bent on appearing professional, appearing like you have all the answers, appearing as though you are the one person to help people with this and you know exactly how it works and you have the 3 easy steps and you can give people the exact roadmap, really you're closing yourself off to asking those questions. Right? You're closing yourself off to being like, ooh, I don't know how this works yet. I'm going to wrestle with that for the next 6 months. Every single thing that I use with my clients is constantly evolving. Even just yesterday, I had a call with my, one of my group programs. And I was like, listen, this worksheet that you've seen me bring up a bunch of times, it's wrong. There's this other thing that needs to be in here. I don't know how it works yet, but that doesn't mean we can't have a conversation about it. So like, let's talk about it. And like, I don't really care about how it fits into the worksheet right now. Like, right. You know what I mean?
Right. And you're like being transparent. You're being, you know, authentic. You're bringing them into the process. And you're also in a way engaging with them that challenges them to grow.
Right.
By not saying like, here's me baby bird feeding you all the time. Like, whoa, you know, like the landscape is changing. What are we going to do about it?
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, I'm in like a content marketing group that's international, and we all share our data every month about like what's going on YouTube, what's going on TikTok, what's happening with hooks and links and all that stuff. And it's fun to be in a container where we just share what our experience is and we all get to learn from each other.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the biggest pieces of feedback that I get from the group programs that I run are like, I love the fact that I'm not expected to show up and be like, I'm killing it. I love the fact that I'm allowed to come in and be like, this is really hard. I'm having a really hard time. I don't even want you to solve this problem for me right now. I just want to vent about how hard this is. Like, that's also allowed, right? Because we need that. Like, we need to just be real with each other. And like, the number of people who are spinning their wheels because of the fact that they think they're doing things wrong. You know, it's like, oh, this is a struggle for me, so I must not be on the right track. Because everybody that I'm seeing do this out there is showing how when they just follow the steps, it worked so well for them. But it doesn't work for me. So I must be doing it wrong. Let me figure it out. Let me figure it out. Let me figure it out. That figure it out loop is like almost always fueled by anxiety and not critical thinking. And it can bring you down the wrong path so easily. Whereas when you realize, when you can relate to somebody else and you can see, oh, they also struggled in the way that I'm struggling, or, oh, that's also been a slow process for them, or, oh, this person is normalizing that actually it is hard. I think that it gives people a little bit of permission to stay true to themselves instead of constantly trying to figure out the other way because their way doesn't work.
Right.
Right. So,
yeah. And I think that, maybe even broadly culturally, we've really not allowed intuition to be a part of our lives. And I think so much of what has led my work has been intuitive. And it's scary because I feel like in entrepreneurship, so much of what you're doing is based on faith, but or whatever your relationship is with faith. But I think having an intuitive spiritual practice has helped me survive it.
I don't know how you do it without it.
Yeah.
I really don't.
You have to believe in something.
Yeah. I was just having a conversation with a client yesterday and they were saying well, I think that this is the answer, but how do I have evidence of that? And I was like, you don't, which is why the only option is to cultivate some amount of trust. And entrepreneurship is all about moving forward, even when you don't have the evidence. The problem is that there's a group of people who have tried to make it seem as though everything is measurable, everything is tangible, everything can be seen in your metrics. And it's not true because the reality is the reason that most of us are chasing metrics is not because of the metric itself. It's because of the way that it makes us feel, right? It's because of the thing that it does for us on an intrinsic level. Metrics can always be manipulated to look a certain way, right? Everyone can talk about how much money their business is making top line and then leave out the part about how much they've invested and how they're actually losing money or how much they're actually paying themselves or how much credit card debt they have or whatever, right? They can be very easily manipulated. So if we operate on that view, we're going to constantly be chasing this thing where the only way to fit in is to buy into that way of operating, which for most of us, we don't actually believe in. We know deep down it's bullshit. So the only option is to say, you know what? I trust this for me. I know that this is true for me. I don't have anything to show you that says that for sure. But what I do have is humanity. I have some humility. I have, I've been talking about the same things over and over again, and I'm willing to admit when I'm wrong, but I'm also willing to show you what I can do and be honest about that, right? It's a totally different kind of way of operating, I think, and it requires trust. And it's part of the reason why whenever I think about who the people I want to work with people who have some ability to trust in things that they can't see, because there's an element of that evidence, that piece of paper, the certification that says that I have done enough that I'm just not going to be able to provide if I'm doing things in a way that is really in integrity for me.
Right. Yeah. Because something I love to say all the time is everything's made up, even those certificates. I looked up, what does it take to create a certificate program? Literally nothing. You just create one. So
let me tell you, I am a certified project management professional, which is one of the hardest, most difficult professional certifications to earn. And y'all, ask me how often I actually am oh yes, I'm able to do this because I'm certified. And all it is you studied long enough to take the test and ace a test. That's it. And then when you walk out of that room, you forget every single thing that you just put down on that exam. And it all comes back around to the experiences that you've had, the hard conversations that you've had, the things that you've witnessed that worked, that didn't work, and all of those things that you've logged in your own mind. And now you can walk into a room and you can figure out much more quickly than everybody else how to move something forward in a way that is effective. That's intuition.
Right.
That's what intuition is. So I don't know. I know people. I know I have been in corporate environments, nonprofit environments where people are really big on constantly getting certified in something new so they can put more letters at the end of their name. And when you are constantly figuring out how to pass a test, you are not figuring out how to actually get good at a thing.
Right. You're not getting that experience.
Yeah, you're not getting the experience. And also, if anyone's familiar with the work of Carol Dweck, I'm obsessed with Carol Dweck. I talk about Carol Dweck all the time. She works on growth mindset. And what we know from Carol Dweck's work is you do not actually build skills by trying to get the right answer all the time. You build skills by doing a thing, even though you feel like you don't know what the hell you're doing, struggling through it, messing it up, and then figuring out how the thing works and doing it again. That's how you build skill.
Is she the writer who talks about like the myelin sheath and how that gets like developed by like being just beyond the edge of your experience?
I don't think so.
Okay, that's just something I'm relating to.
That is very related to it for sure. Carol Dweck is a professor at Stanford, I want to say. She has a book called Mindset, The New Psychology of Success. And it goes through, the sections of the book are like growth mindset applied to parenting, applied to business, applied to school, and it's just this really excellent explainer of why the way that our society tells us our job is to arrange successes and avoid failures is the very thing that keeps us from actually gaining the skills that we need to truly be good at a thing and really be successful at that thing.
That's very interesting.
Yeah, it's very good.
Yeah, I'll have to look into her work.
Highly recommend.
So I only have, I think, 3 more questions for you if you have time.
I have time. Yeah.
Okay. So the first of the 3 is, especially since we've just been talking about, appearances, certificates, all that stuff. What do you feel either in the past or currently people most misunderstand about you?
That I have my shit together. So again, coming back to some personal things about me, my role in my family was always the one who had their shit together, like total chaos. And my job was like, just be as perfect as possible so that my mom doesn't like completely lose it. Like it was just like, that was my role. And so I'm very good at like, I always appear as though I have my head on straight. Apparently I always appear as though like I know what I'm doing. People tell me that all the time, which is a benefit of what's going on under the surface, which is that I feel completely unqualified for almost everything that I do. I am in major struggle often, and I seriously question once a month I question if I should just shut my entire business down. And probably once a week, I'm like, what am I doing? What did I think, and I'm now almost 4 years into this. And I'm like, once a week, I'm like, nope, you have been going down the wrong path this whole time. You are totally off base. If you don't figure something else out, this is never going to work, So yeah, people tell me that like, you're so, you just really like have it together. And I'm like, I don't know what gives you that impression.
Right.
But apparently that's the way that I come off. And I don't.
Yeah, I can totally relate to that. Like I was having one of those days yesterday. There was a snow day. And so my daughter was home and I'm already feeling like behind on everything. And then I lost a day and I was just like, oh my God, I'm so stressed out, and I was like, and I'm like, in this kind of semi burnout stage. So it's, there's always that like crisis part of being an entrepreneur where you're like, can I really do this?
Yeah.
But I think it's like, for me, I think I tried it a couple times as like my 3rd business. So I'm aware of the highs and lows and I can accept that that's part of the path. But I think if you're not expecting it, it can be really terrifying.
Yeah, it's like a necessary part of the path. Like if you think that you have it together all the time, then you're probably just avoiding some big stuff that and that's again something that comes up in Carol Dweck's work. Like you've got to follow the uncomfortable, risky stuff. And it's not fun all the time.
No, sometimes you just like fall down in the mud and that's part of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Well, yeah, that's definitely, I hope affirming for other people to understand that like, even if we look like we have it together, we're also improvising in the mud with everybody else.
So improvising. Yeah. Yeah. And like seriously questioning ourselves.
Right. Like the existential crisis is a part of the job description.
Yes, it is. Yep.
So then on a completely different note, are you working on anything that you're excited about to like share with people?
Yeah.
Like what's really lighting you up right now that you're working on?
Oh, well, So many things. Like now that you asked that question, I'm like, wow, which one do I pick? So starting a YouTube channel, which I'm excited about because one of the things that I'm really proud of as my business has grown is that I've been able to slowly make things more and more accessible for people. Like prices for my group programs are all on a sliding scale, which I can do now. And I think that like starting a YouTube channel is part of that, just giving people some access to like in-depth, very real explainers of some of the things that I cover with a lot of my clients. And so I'm working on that kind of behind the scenes. I'm also working on, I have a, course, I guess. I like hate even calling it a course, but I guess that it's a course. It's really not. It's more of like a guided experience that has been in beta for a while, and it's called the Aligned Business Portal, and it is to create like a really aligned offer and then messaging and marketing around that feels not like shit, pretty much. And I did it in a way that is like, I think pretty unconventional for like a kind of like a course. So this week I'm getting feedback from folks, and I'm about to kind of make the adjustments to that so that I can launch it in its new and improved form. And then on the other side of things, I am exploring creating some management trainings for new managers at a new organization that I am in conversations with, which is cool because I love doing that stuff with like larger organizations. And honestly, like that's part of the reason why I'm able to turn around and make some of my other work more accessible to people. You know, you charge where you can charge so that you can turn around and offer things at maybe a lower rate or free in other parts of the business. So excited about all of that.
That's very cool. Yeah, congratulations on that.
Thanks.
I've been separating those in my mind as the how and the why. Like the how is like, oh, I can charge this much for this service, and I know that people will pay this much. And the why is to make sales and marketing stuff accessible to anybody, especially like creative and outside the box entrepreneurs.
Absolutely.
And I think having those separated has been helpful because I'm always trying to figure out like, what's the shape of my business? and that helps.
I hear you. I hear you.
And so for anybody who's listening who wants to know more about you, what is the best way to find you and learn more and work with you or learn from you?
Yeah, I mean, if you're listening to this, I assume that you listen to podcasts. And so perhaps the best thing to do is maybe find my podcast, which is called Transcend Your Dichotomy. If you go to Brooke-Monaghan.com, there's a G in there. So just like before you do it, look at my name in writings. So Brooke-Monaghan.com/podcast, you will land on a page where you can actually, I can actually just email you a list of top episodes on specific topics. So I know that for some people, like I personally am the kind of person who finds new podcasts and just listens to like a lot of it. But maybe you don't have the time to do that and you just want to dive into the things that are really relevant to what you want. So you can go to that page and I'll send you a list, and it's broken down by mindset, marketing, and leadership. And so you can just dive into the ones that are helpful for you.
Very cool. And like on socials and stuff, what would you say is your favorite social channel to interact with people?
So like I said, I am starting a YouTube, so I'll be on there eventually. But right now, mostly I'm on Instagram. I am at Briggs Monaghan, which is bizarre. I know it's a long story. But that's about to be my handle on YouTube as well. We're just leaning into it. A lot of people think that my name is Briggs, which is fine because some people actually do call me that. So that's the place where I hang out the most. And really my email list is like the place where I end up sending out the good stuff. But if you go to my website and you grab that email with those podcast episodes, you'll end up on my email list. So maybe that's the best thing to do.
Perfect. Yeah. Okay. And then just to open the floor for you, is there anything that you feel like you want to say about anti-professionalism or anybody who's in this space that's sort of struggling to find where they belong or what they should do? Like, are there any closing thoughts that are just sort of coming up for you?
I think that what's coming up is just to know that it's not gonna be comfortable. Like, it's not, especially at first, gonna feel great. But I think that for those of us who our integrity is pointing us in a different direction than what is standard, it's the only real option. Because at some point, you are going to be so fucking sick of trying to fit yourself into whatever box that you're going to decide to show up as who you actually are anyways. So you may as well do that now. And you just need to know that if you feel like really exposed, if you feel like you're opening yourself up to risk of being rejected, if you feel like you're opening yourself up to the risk of not being liked, if you feel like you might piss people off, yeah, that doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. That means that you're probably doing it right. And it just comes with the territory, but you do it long enough and it kind of starts to become an indicator to you that you're on the right track, and it starts to feel a little bit easier. There's always going to be a growth edge that's going to be uncomfortable, but it does get easier. And so just know that, like, for all of us, really, there's no version of leadership or there's no leadership in the way that we want to see ourselves. There's no business in the way that we truly want to see ourselves show up to business without taking a risk. And that's going to be more accessible to you on some days than others. That's okay too. You don't need to be on all the time. But when you do it, it doesn't mean you're doing it wrong if it feels really scary and you're doubting yourself. We're all doubting ourselves.
Right. It's
except
terrifying.
for like the sociopaths.
Right. Which, I guess they're doing their own thing. I don't really know. Well, yeah, I really appreciate you being here today. I really appreciate your time. I'm excited to send this out. Yeah. So with that, that's the end of the 4th episode of the Anti-Professional Podcast. Thank you all for listening, and have a great day.
Thank you so much. This was so fun.
Thanks so much for listening. Once again, this podcast is sponsored by Identity Pending. You can learn more about our digital marketing services at www.identitypending.com. If you would like to know more about Brooke Monaghan, go to www.brooke-monaghan. That'll be in the show notes if you want to find them. Good luck out there. I hope that you do something that scares you this week, because that's part of being an entrepreneur and an anti-professional. I love you. Good luck. Goodbye.